Hello everyone, welcome to my series on VBScript programming, and today we are back with an exciting challenge. The best way to learn any programming language is to go through some use cases. So what I thought of was initially to go through the basic concepts like variables and if conditions and loops and all those things. But what I felt was more useful for the user would be to directly jump into a use case, and while we're going through the statements we will explain the loop conditions, we'll explain the if conditions, we'll explain the string assignments, the numeric assignments, and how the calculations are happening. So that would give a better idea to the user or to a developer of why that command is being used and how is it to be used, where is it to be used. Now, what we have right now in front of us, the challenge for today is to convert a simple text report into a Excel report. So what I have here is one text file, and I have an Excel file, and I have my VBS file. So this is a blank file which I'm supposed to create. So right now it's just a blank file. Now, this is my text report. So basically I have just created an employee roster, and we're thinking of an employee roster which is printed in a structured manner where the employee ID is of 10 characters, the employee name is of 30 characters, department ID is again 10 characters, and designation is 30 characters, something like that. So let's see how it works. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to skip all this page, and we are going to include one header, and then we are going to just include the data record. So we'll pick up these data from here, and we'll pick up these data from here, and we'll pick up these data from here, and then the loop will end. And finally, when we look at our Excel report, it's going to look like something like this, where we have employee ID, name, and department ID, designation, manager ID, and date of joining, and all the data will come here. So basically 9 rows will come here. So this is how it's going to look. So initially what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this header because this is something that we're going to do programmatically. I'll just save this. This is now a blank file, and this is our text format report. So what do we have here? We have employee ID. We have some common names like Peter Parker, Clark Kent, Bruce Banner, Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, Natasha Romanoff, Barry Allen, Bruce Wayne, and Diana Prince. And we have their corresponding designations: Spider-Man, Superman, Hulk, Captain America, Iron Man, Black Widow, Flash, Batman, Wonder Woman. And we have the respective managers and their date of joinings. So let's see how to process this record. Now the first thing we notice when we open this text report is that all the records start right after this dotted line. This dotted line basically separates our record data with the header, and it also separates the last record from the next header. So this is basically page 1 and then page 2 and page 3. So let's imagine a scenario where this has 50 records, and then the next page comes, then there again 50 records, and then the next page comes. So it's just for the sake of understanding, I put 3 records on each page. So this is our delimiter. So we look for this line, and after this line we are either assuming a record or we are assuming a page content, page number. So we just need to consider the record. So this is how we're going to filter out the records out of this page and then put them in our Excel file. Okay, so let's see how that works. Let me just fire up the VBS file in Notepad++. Okay. Now the first thing we need to do is to open this text file for reading purpose. So guys, this video is not a prepared video, so I'm going through the commands. I'm just thinking the commands and writing them as we proceed. So there may be few moments where I'm stuck at some point. I need to figure out the logic, so please bear with me. Okay, so we start by creating a file system object. Now, when VBScript we are doing operations on files or folders, this file system object is the base. So this contains the complete set of libraries and commands which are used to operate on files and folders. So using this file system object, let me just open the file. So let me just create a file object now. Obj file equal to obj fso. So I'm using the file system object and doing a get file, and this is my file, VBScript programming employee roster.txt. That's my file. So I'm going to put the file over here. Done. Now I have to read the content of all the file and then store them in a variable. So I need a stream variable. So obj txt_str equal to obj file dot open as text stream. So we use this function when we need to open the file which is identified by this variable as a stream, and then store the stream object in this variable. So we use 1 as the parameter. 1 means for reading purpose, 2 means for writing purpose. and then we create a file content variable. File contents equal to obj txt str dot read all. So this basically reads everything in the file and then stores the string contents. So when I say string content, I mean the actual data of the file is stored in this variable now. Okay, so let's move forward. What we need to do now is, right now all this is one single variable. We need to split this. We need to go line by line. So the best way to split this record is by splitting by the CRLF. So CRLF is basically our line feed and carriage return. This is basically our enter key. So whenever we press the enter key, it stores the CRLF as a character here. So our delimiter is the CRLF, the new line character. Okay. So what we do is we create array, file contents arr, create array. So array is basically an indexed collection of record. So array can contain, let's say, multiple items, 1 2 3 4 5, and each element of the array is indexed by a index. So the first position is always 0, next is 1 2 3 4. So array can be, array of integers, it could be array of string. We could create array of string variables, string values, of course, enclosed in double quotations, but you get the point, right? So array is basically a collection of values which can be indexed, which can be referenced by this index. So let's see how that works. I'll just remove this. Now, how do you populate this array? We populate this array by saying file contents dot, or maybe split the file contents by VBCRLF. VBCRLF is the VB version of new line character. We use \n for JavaScript. In this case, we use VBCRLF. So now our array is prepared. So let's just see if the array is actually working. For I equal to 0 to ubound file contents array -1, put a message box, file contents array, and then we refer it by I and say next. Okay, let's understand this first. So this is not required for the code. I am just doing this for your understanding. This is my basic for loop, which says my variable I starts from the value 0 and goes till the upper bound. So ubound means upper bound of this array. Now we can use this function upper bound on arrays, and we can reduce it by 1. So because it starts from 0, so if the array has 5 elements, then we need to go from 0 to 4. If the array has 10 elements, we need to go from 0 to 9. So we reduce it by 1 and go from 0 to -1, and then we message box that value, file contents _arr, and then in bracket we put the index value. So this is how we use this index value to refer to the value that is contained in this element of the array. Let's see how it works. If I run this, expected end of statement, line 4, character 17. Let's see that. Line 4, character 17. Oh, sorry, I think I understood the mistake. We cannot use the declaration and initialization on the same line, so we need to take this value, put it over here, and similarly we need to take this value and put it over here. Let's run this again, and now you see the lines of the text file. So this was our text file. The entire text file came inside a variable called file contents. We split the variable using VBCRLF and push the contents into an array. That's what the split function does. It pushes the contents, the split contents of the string, into an array. And then we are looping by this index, and we are messaging the lines one by one. So this is our first line. Let's come back here. This is our first line. This is the second line. Then we have the dotted lines over here, and then one by one the employee records are coming. 9, the last dotted line, and that should be the end of it. Okay, so our for loop is working fine. Now let's go back to our script. So now we have achieved the first part of our code. We are looping through all the lines. Now we need to find out the header first. So let me just remove this message box. We don't need the message box right now. So whatever we're doing, we need to put everything inside this for loop. Let's see. How do we identify the header? Now, since this report is a very specific format, so there are multiple logic that we can use. We can look for the page command, and then right after that we can look at the header. So the next record can be our header, or we can just simply say that the line number 2 is our header because we know the format of the report, right? So coming back to our text to Excel. Okay, so let's put a condition over here saying if I equal to 1, which means it's the second row, then we create a string variable here called header row. So if you've seen my previous video, you know that we can define multiple variables using a single dim command. So we say that our header row is the file content ARR of I. So we have taken this row inside a variable, which is the header row. Now we end the loop over here. So now this if condition says that if I equal to 1, then the header row populated with the value of this line. Otherwise, for every other row of this loop, this if condition will not be satisfied. It will be satisfied only once for the second row. So our header value contains only the second row. Now, so this is not enough right now. We need to split the header and put them in different cells of Excel. Okay, so now let's put a else if condition. Oops, is it else if? Okay. So we have taken care of the second line. We have identified that the second line is our header. So we have taken care of the header. So whenever the second line comes, that will get stored in our header variable. But what about the remaining lines? So we have to say that if our line contains page, then we have to ignore it. And if our line contains, let's say, employee ID, we have to ignore it because this can come in multiple lines. And if our line contains this, then also we have to ignore it, but then we have to be ready because the next line is our data record. So how do we do that? So let's say we put a condition file contains error I. Okay, so here we use a VBScript function called instr. instr, I'll just explain the function in a bit. Let me just finish the line. If instr this and page, or not even page, we can directly go with employee roster. What was the next line? This. Okay, so let me just bring them in two different lines. It will be easier for you to understand. So what did we do here? Okay, so this is our else if condition. If I equal to 1, we are going for the header. Else if, so if I is not equal to 1, what are the other conditions we need to check? If this file content error I, which basically is the entire row that we are reading one by one, it could be the third row, fourth row, fifth row, sixth row. If that row contains this employee roster, so instr means it is searching for this string, the second argument, inside the first argument, and it's returning the position of this second argument in the first argument. So this is the bigger string, this is the smaller string. We are searching for this inside this and returning the position. So if that position is not or more than 0, then we know that this string exists somewhere. Similarly, if this is more than 0, then employee ID exists in the string. So any of these conditions are satisfied, then we need to ignore this record. Okay, let's come back to our original line. So here we just ignore and do nothing as of now. I just put a comment. I'm not going to do anything. Else if. Okay, so this is the condition where we check for the dotted lines, because the dotted line says that we are going to find a record in the next line, or we are going to find a page in the next line. So let's see how to handle that. If instr file contents arr I, comma, and then okay, so we go back to our roster, we copy the entire dotted line. We could have copied a part of it, but let's just copy the entire line. Okay, that's just going too far. Let's just copy a part of it. So anyway, other lines don't even contain the dots. So if this is greater than 0, then we say next row header equal to true. Let's put a string over here and say true. So what are we doing here? Okay, let me just assign the variable next row header over here. So it's again one string variable we are assigning. Okay, so what you're basically saying is if this contains this dotted lines, then the next row could be a header. Oh, sorry, the next row could be a data row. Sorry, why did I say header? Next row data. Next row data could be true. Okay, so that's what we're saying. But now there are two conditions. After this line, there could be a data line or there could be a page line also. Before the page line, there is a dotted line. So if we're at line number 7 and we have read this line, then the next row is not a data row. Okay, so but okay, just see how this is going to work out. Now what's going to happen is it will come to this line and say next row is header. So we are prepared for capturing the header, which is correct. Let's say it comes in this line and says next row is, okay, am I saying header every time? Okay, it's always data, next row data. So basically if this instr is true, if this file content line contains this dotted lines, it means that next row is data. So we are prepared to capture data rows. So what happens when we are in this line? The next row becomes a page 2. Our variable is saying next row data true, but then when the loop comes back and goes to the next line, this condition is satisfied and we ignore and we do nothing. But next time when we come to this dotted line, again the next row becomes true. But when it comes to the next row, none of these conditions are satisfied. So it's not the number 2 row, it doesn't contain employee roster, doesn't contain dotted lines, so it just contains plain data. Okay, let me just try to write this and maybe it will be easier to understand. Else if next row data equal to true, then data row equal to file content arr I. So basically we are checking that when the loop again comes, so first it looks at the dotted lines and sets a variable to true. Next time when the loop goes back and comes to the next line, it goes through all the records and it doesn't satisfy any condition because it's a data row, and we check if our data row is true, which means that just before the previous line we have seen the dotted rows. So we just transfer that entire record to a variable called data row. Now next time when we go again, if any of the conditions are satisfied, so let's say if it is the second row, then obviously our next row data value should be false. If it contains employee roster or employee ID, then also next row data should be false. Next row data should be true only in case of dotted lines. Okay, now let's just delete the extra lines and see if this structure is proper. So we start by reading the first record. Let me just save this. We start by reading the first record, which contains employee roster. So it will come to the for loop with the file content I containing the first record. It will check if I equal to 1, no, I is 0. It will come to the next else if condition, does I contain employee roster? Yes, it does contain employee roster. So next row data is false. It will skip all the conditions because this condition is true, so obviously all the remaining conditions are false. So again go back, come back with the next line. The next line is employee ID. Again it will skip this, sorry, okay, it will line number 2, so this is I equal to 1. So header row is populated, and since this is selected, everything else fails, it comes back. Now it comes to this one, and this condition is satisfied. We set our next row data to true, and we don't do anything else, we go back. Next time it comes to this record, and we push it to data row. Okay, again it goes back, comes with the next record. Even now the next row data is true and it doesn't satisfy any of these conditions, so it pushed data row. Third row, now the conditions are satisfied. It satisfies this condition because this variable is still true. It gets pushed to third row, data row. Now again we get this. The moment we get this, it satisfies this condition, so we say next row data equal to true. Okay, done. Come back with the new row now. What is the next row? Page 2. So moment it comes inside with page 2, this condition gets satisfied, because this page 2 line contains employee roster. So this condition gets satisfied, and it says next row data false, and it doesn't do anything else. It goes back, comes back with a new line which contains this, which is again satisfied in this condition because there is OR condition over here. If you've seen my previous video, you know that OR is basically a logical operator between this condition and this condition. So any of these conditions is satisfied, the entire if condition is satisfied. So now it comes to the next dotted lines. Once again it comes here and condition is satisfied, and the next row becomes our data row. So this is the way our data row gets populated with a proper data row every time. But there is a problem here. We are overwriting the data row every time. So every time the data row contains the current row, but it completely overrides the previous rows. We need to keep the data row populated by all the rows. So we need to concatenate the data row with itself. So what we're going to do is data row equal to data row ampersand this ampersand VBCRLF. So what are we doing here? So let me just put data row over here and set data row as blank in the beginning. So what are we doing here? We are saying the data row is basically the previous value of data row ampersand. Ampersand means concatenation. It joins two strings. So you're saying the previous value of data row is joined with this new value that has come with this array index, and we're joining it again with a new line character. So basically every line will come in a new line. Now let's put a message box. Oh, sorry. Let's put a message box here in data row and see what kind of values we're getting. Okay, let me just put a message box for header row as well. So header row is this, and let me just put a VBCRL because we need an enter key after the header. So header row and then data row. We ampersand the two things and put a message box. Let's see what happens. Let's run this code. Will it give an error? Okay, we have blank. Then we have the header, then we have the data. First row came, then the second row came, then the third row came. Okay, then we are looping, then the fourth row came, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth. So this is working exactly the way it's expected to do. It is skipping all these records. So after reading a set of data records, it's skipping the delimiter records and then again joining the data records. So our extraction part is achieved. We have filtered out the header row and the data row out of this set of records. What we need to do now is a Excel write. So let's do that. Let's try that. Okay. Till now we have been working only with text files. So we have just opened a text file, we have just opened a bunch of variables, and we were working with the string records. Now we need to open an Excel file. So how do we do that? Let's come here and do a set Excel object equal to create object Excel.application. Okay, now let's so this basically opens our basic Excel application object, and then we use this object to open a workbook object equal to Excel object dot workbooks dot open. I hope it won't give an error. And our Excel path is right here. This is our Excel file. Open the Excel file right here. Now we also set a sheet object equal to workbook object dot worksheets, and we say sheet 1 because that's the default sheet in the Excel. So we did not modify the sheet name as of now. I think if we open the employee roster, it's a blank sheet 1. Yep, that's a sheet 1. Close this. Okay, so we have defined the sheet object, workbook object, Excel object, everything. Now it's time to write to the sheet object. So how do we do that? Now what we are doing here is looping through different records. So it's a line by line looping. So it's every time a data row is read, an Excel row needs to be written. Every time a header row is read, the header row in Excel needs to be written. So that's the way it has to work. Let's see how to. Okay, so we have taken the header row over here, and next row data is false. What we can do is within the same loop we can start writing some Excel data. So sheet object dot cells, and we start off with our first cell, which is 1 equal to, and header row contains the entire header row in one string, this entire header row in one string, but we know the position of the start and end position of each field. So employee ID is 10 characters. So cells 1 is mid of header row, start position 1, length is 10. So mid basically is a substring operation. It takes the substring of the initial string. We need to give the starting position and we need to give the length. So that's how mid works. So similarly we say sheet object dot cells, same row but second column, equal to mid of. So 1 to 10 is done. We start from 11, and this time we need to go till 30 characters. So 11 to 30. Similarly we need to do for the other fields. Let me just put the statement so I can just change the values. So how many columns do we have? In 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Okay, so which means 1, 2, this is 3, 4, 5 and 6. Perfect. This is extra, we don't need this, just delete this. Okay, now 11 to 30 is our second column. So 10 here, 30 here, so we have already 40 cells covered. This is 41, 41 to, let's see, so 10 cells over here, 30 cells over here. Was it 30 or 20? The selection says 19. It actually says 19. Let me just check the data row. Okay, yeah, it says 19. So it's not 30, it's just 19. Okay, let's go back to our Excel and correct the positions. So it starts from 11 and it is just 19. So we have 10 over here and 19 over here, which is 29. So the next should start from 30th position. Let's see. So this should start from column 30, yes, and it should go to 10 characters. So from 30 we go 10 characters. So we have 10, 10, 20 and 19, which is 39. This should start from 40. Starting from 40, yes, and this goes to 30 characters. Okay, for some reason I put more space in designation, I don't know why, but this is 30. Okay, and then they should start from 70. And they should go to, I think, 10 characters. Yep, 10 characters. So 70, and we have 10 characters over here, and then we have 80 over here, and we have 10 characters over here. So that's the DOJ, date of joining. We have starting 80 and then 10 characters. Perfect. So those are the headers. So once the header row is captured in this variable, the same iteration, the same time, the sheet object will be populated, the cells will be populated with these values. Okay, so here we have hard-coded the values of the rows because we know that it's going to be the first row. But in case of data, we need to be a little more careful because we are skipping rows in between, but the Excel we cannot put any blank rows. So when we are taking data, okay, so in this case, I think we don't need to join anything. We'll just remove everything, keep just one record at a time because we're at the same time writing to Excel, so we don't need to. Okay, so we need to keep a track of how many records written in Excel, and we have to increment that. We cannot just go with this I because this I contains a lot of lines which we don't need. These lines we don't need. So I counter we cannot keep as our sheet counter. So for Excel we need to have a separate variable. So let me just create a separate variable near Excel which says Excel data line counter, and we initially put this to 0. Now, okay, not 0, let's put this to 1. So when we come to this, let's just copy this entire structure because we are going to need this. When we get a new data row, then the sheet object cells, and this is going to be our Excel data line counter. So put this, oh my god, okay. Is there an easy way to do this? I don't know, sorry guys. So that becomes our line counter, and this is still our column. So column is anyway going to be 6 columns, so that we don't need to change. And this is not the header row, this is the data row. I'll just replace this with data row. Okay, what's going on? Save this. Okay, one thing we did not do here, we did not make this workbook visible. So I need to put workbook object dot visible equal to true. Okay, let's just see this. It might throw an error at some point. Let's just see. Okay, we need to increment this value of Excel data line count. Now that we have entered one line, the next line has to be 2. So this equal to this plus 1. And we can remove this message box. It's not required now. We've already seen the values. Let's see how this works. Okay, so our workbook variable does not have any visible, so I think the visible is for the application. So let me just go back to our Excel object and make that visible. Run this again. Okay, perfect. But somehow we did not get the header record. We just had the data records. And why is that? Why did we not get the header record? Because we started from line 1. We started the data from line 1, so the code actually overrode the header record. We overwritten our header record. So we need to correct that. Don't save. Go back to our Excel, and this data line counter should start from 2 because we have put the header in line 1. So we don't want to override that. Okay, so save it, and then I think the only thing that's pending to do is just to, once the loop is completed, we need to just close this workbook, save the workbook. That's it. Our code is done. Let's run the code again and see it. Yep. So little bit of formatting is required, but if you see here and if you compare the roster with our Excel sheet that is generated, let me just okay, so we have Peter Parker, Clark Kent, Bruce Banner, Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, Natasha Romanoff, Barry Allen, Bruce Wayne, Diana Prince. We have all the designations. We have the department IDs 101, 102, 103, 213, and then 321. We have all the employee IDs, and we also have the manager IDs and date of joining. Okay, awesome. This is fine. This is perfect. So all that is required to be done right now is to just close the loop, and right after that we need to just reset our variables to null just to clean up the memory. Okay, so today we discussed a simple VBScript program to convert a text report into Excel format. Please try this yourself, and if you have any questions, just drop a note in the comment section and I'll help you out. Thank you so much.